The second talk is OpenSat source camera attribution. The presenter will be Felipe Costa from Unicamp. This is a joint work with Michael Ekman from Skidmore College, Walter Shire, Securix Incorporation, and me at Unicamp as well. So Felipe, please.
Hi, my name is Felipe, and I will present the work OpenSat source camera attribution. So, digital images have been used as crime evidence in courts of law. For example, child pornography and piracy. But considering that these images can be modified, digitally modified, it's very important to verify the integrity and authenticity. To not use a fake image as a crime evidence. A way to do this is like a ballistic exams, when I have to discover which gun shot that bullet. We want to discover which camera generated a set of images. Why do you do this? Identify image source is a way to prove, at first, an image is not a result of digital manipulations. And for example, a suspect of child pornography has produced a set of illegal images, and he's not just a user of these images, he produced these images. And this is the source attribution problem. There is analysis of device features for identify the source of digital documents. There are some approaches considering cameras, scanners, camcorders, and printers. We worked with cameras, and we did not consider the EXIF headers. When you take a photo, inside this photo there is a header called EXIF. This header has some information about the model and the brand of camera and serial number and other informations. But these information it can be easily destroyed or modified, so we do not consider this. Source attribution can be performed considering brand or model identification. I want to discover which model of camera generates a set of images, and specific device identification. That is our goal, and the goal is find a specific device that generates a set of cameras. There are some approaches that considers factory defects in cameras, dust on lens. Most accurate techniques consider noise analysis. These two is our baselines. I will explain a little bit about of them. Lucas et al. Proposed an estimative of sensor pattern noise. That the authors consider that one camera has a pattern noise, and the images has this pattern noise inside them. How did they do this? I have a camera. They took some pictures of this camera. For each picture, they extract the noise using discrete wavelet transform filter, and they calculate an average of these noises. So this average is our sensor pattern noise. Now I have an image, and I want to discover if this image was generated by that camera. So I extract the noise of this image. I will perform a correlation between the noise of image and the sensor pattern noise. And if the value of this correlation is higher than a threshold, I will consider that this image was generated by that camera. So Lee proposed an enhancement for Lucas et al. Approach, aiming at reducing false positive rates. Lee considered that the noise of image has some details of scene that can turn it hard the identification. So he proposed some mathematical models for enhancing residual noise and trying to reduce sense detail on the noise. So this technique reports good results, but the authors consider a closed set scenario. It is, if they have 10 cameras, for example, they consider for training just images generated by one of these 10 cameras, and for tests, images generated by one of these 10 cameras. But considering an OpenSet scenario is closer to a real environment. Why? In an OpenSet scenario, we have information about some classes, for example, the class triangle, square, circle, and pentagon. Let's consider that the class pentagon is our class of interest. I will train my classifier considering that classes, but at the test, I have some samples, some images that was generated by cameras that I don't have access in the training. All right, this is our negative classes. So what do we do? Our approach has three steps. The first one is definition of regions of interest. The second one is the feature extraction, and the last one, OpenSet source camera attribution. The first one is the definition of regions of interest. Lucas and Lee consider the central region of image. We define 9 different regions of the image. Don't just the center. I will explain. Each region is a square of 512 pixels. These are our regions. The regions 1 to 5 is because when somebody take a photo, somebody usually focus the object of interest in the center of the lens. So here might have some more information. And this the regions 6, 7, 8, and 9 is because we're trying to get some information about vignetting, because there are some cameras that has these defects, and this is this darkest area in the image, and we want to discover this. The second step is the feature extraction, and we calculate SPN for each ROI. Each region of interest, we calculate the SPN, but Lucas and Lee consider images in grayscale. We expand this for other channel colors. So we perform some experiments, and we see that RGB from RGB color space and Y for YCBCR color space, that is luminance, was the best color space that for our work in our case. So we calculate the SPN as Lucas do. Calculate the average of each region, each color space. So for each region, we have 4 sensor pattern noises. Now I have a camera, and I want to discover if this camera was generated by that. Now I have an image, and I want to discover if this image was generated by that camera. So for each image, we calculate the residual noise considering each region and each color space, perform the correlation between each ROI and each SPN for each camera, and thus we have a feature vector containing 36 correlation values. This will be our feature vector. And the last step is the OpenSet camera attribution. This is the main contribution of our work. Formally, we want to discover a classifier that, if I have a sample, the classifier function must be higher than 0 if this sample was belong of our positive class. For this, we use a support vector machine classifier. Here is an example of SVM linear case. And when the SVM classifier trying to discover an hyperplane that separated 2 classes, considering just these samples in near samples, considering the hyperplane, consider these samples are our support vectors. SVM classifiers try to minimize structural risk. They try to discover a hyperplane exactly in the middle between the 2 classes, but it works very well when SVM knows all classes in training. It is in the closed set. So we define a risk. We define a way for minimize the risk for the open set. That is a minimization of data error during training after the separation hyperplane calculation. Let's be our inverse of accuracy. Let's P be our interest class, and N our negative class. It is our cameras that we know in training. So this accuracy is the average between the accuracy of positive classes and the accuracy of negative classes separately. Accuracy of positive classes is calculated with a function theta, and the accuracy of negative classes was calculated with our function omega. After this, we move the decision hyperplane in epsilon. Why? Considering that we have these two classes, green and blue, the class blue is our class of interest, and SVM generates this hyperplane here. But we want to protect one class, so we move this hyperplane, trying to protect our class of interest, and just consider, for example, this class head class, because in this case, head class, we don't know anything about this class in the training, but we have some samples in test. So moving this plane, we want to disconsider everything everything under the hyperplane, and this process is named decision boundary carving. Thus, at the testing, we modified functions theta and omega. Now, if a positive class will be classified, if I have a positive sample, he must be classified positive if is higher than epsilon, not is higher than 0 as the preview function. So now methods and validation. I will talk about our data set. We have 3,750 images generated by 25 cameras. These images was generated with native resolution of the cameras and native JPEG compression, and with different illumination, zoom, and focus conditions, as images indoor and outdoor, with and without flash, and other conditions. We performed a 5-fold cross-validation. For this, we used 3 folds for sensor pattern noise generation, 1 fold for decision hyperplane calculation and decision boundary carving, and the last fold for tests. With this, we got some results. We consider that we have at training 15, 10, 5, and 2 cameras. We performed some experiments considering only the central ROI, the central ROI plus the decision boundary carving, all ROIs, all 9 ROIs, and all ROIs plus decision boundary carving. And the best results is our approach is considering 15, 10, and 5 cameras using all ROIs and decision boundary carving. And with 2 cameras, decision boundary carving doesn't help very much. So the best result was using just all ROIs, comparing to Lucas and Lee approaches, all right? Consider that I have 2 cameras with the same brand and same model, just 2 cameras for training, but the test I have all 25 cameras. We got these results, and the best results was with our approaches without decision boundary carving, but the result was a little bit closer, but our approach was a little bit higher. And the last results was a breakdown of OpenSet, considering that I have 15 cameras for training and 25 for testing. This is a breakdown of true positive and true negative rates, and our approach was higher than comparing to Lucas and Lee. Final consideration. Our approach got good results. We can take advantage of potential machine learning and pattern classification methods because we defined a feature vector, so you can use any classifier. We generate a public data set. We generate a data set that will be published now. And our approach is the first step to move social attribution approaches toward meeting the strong standards of Dalbert trilogy. This trilogy is very strict to using social attribution approaches as evidence of primes. In our future works, we intend to perform some experiments with low-quality images. We want to extract additional features considering pattern noises and the process of generation of the images, and analyze some counter-forensic techniques that was some approaches that want to discover the efficiency of our method. And we want to thank Unicamp, Institute of Computing, Research of Complex Data Lab, Capacity Microsoft Research for financial support. Thank you.
Thanks, Felipe. We have a few minutes for question. Felipe was fast. So if anyone has any question, raise the hand, please.
If you want to take an image from a camera and say that and modify it so that it looks like it's from another camera, do you think your algorithm could detect this? I mean, it takes the noise pattern of the other image and mixes it up.
Yeah, this is one of the counter-forensic techniques that we want to explore next. It's called flat fielding, that we got the information about one camera and put inside one other image that was generated by another camera, and there are some results that this camera was some classifiers consider that this image was generated by that camera, and it's not true. And there are another approaches that try to identify this kind of process. So this is one of counter-forensic techniques that we want to explore later. Right.
Thank you for the good work. I have a quick question. You mentioned that your block size that you have selected is 512 by 512. Is there any specific reason for that size, or have you experimented with smaller or bigger sizes of the...
Here?
Yes.
Lucas and Lee performed some experiments considering square regions, all right? And regions with 128 and 512 and some blocks. We just considered that for 512 square because it's how can I say? It works very well.
Complementing his answer, this size is one of the most common size used in the literature. And it's a size that's easy to create a decomposition in multi-scales because it's multiple of 2. And the number of regions of 9, it's because it's the best way to capture the anisotropy of the images, so that's the choice. But the 512 by 512 is the most common size, and it's because it's a multiple of 2. He has some experiments with others, but...
More questions?
Any other? Still have time.
You said you choose the 5 first regions, the central regions, because the photographer will focus the object of interest in the center of the image.
Usually.
But what's the motivation to choose this 5 region? You said that was because of the object is there, but this motivation is not because if someone cut the image, the resulting image will be the central image because the object's there. Is this?
No, it's because this is how I said before. When somebody take a photo, for example, of this glass, usually people focus the object of interest in the middle of the camera, right? It might have more information about noise because, how can I explain? Some cameras focus the image and how can I say, blur the borders, and maybe he has more information of noise for us.
The reason is that for non-professional photographers, okay, they focus on the center. Professional photographers respect the rule of thirds, and it's more on the sides. But the reason is that when you have the object of interest in the center, most likely when you calculate the sensor pattern noise, you will have a transition between object and background. And that transition will help when you correlate this pattern noise with the pattern noise you calculated before, right? Another option here would be to find places in the image that have more information using like a filter, like a transformation. You could use any interest point detector in the literature and find the texture richness, and you could use that. But the simplest way here was to consider that most people, non-professional photographers, focus the object of interest in the center. So if you have the object in the center, you have more transition between objects and background, and that's going to help you when you calculate the sensor pattern noise, and you have higher correlation values. And that can help, but it's not a rule that works all the time. Okay. Any other? Nope. So thank you. Let's thank the speaker.